Hi, my angels. It's Hailey Reese, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so grateful that you are here, and I hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is an absolutely wild one, you guys. When I tell you this case is just not only shocking and absolutely wild, but it is the case of an ultimate betrayal. We are going to be diving into the absolutely evil crimes of Janie Lynn Ridd, who became the absolute epitome of the worst best friend anybody could have. I have told you guys so many times that nothing scares me more than what human beings are capable of doing to one another. But this case even rises well beyond that, because this goes beyond what a human being can do to another human being, or even stranger at that. This is a case about somebody who was able to do the unimaginable to somebody they called family. This case entangles a friendship of 25 years, a bond described as that of family, and a disturbing motive leading to the ultimate evil and betrayal. All right, so let's start at the very beginning here, when Rachel would meet Janie Lynn Ridd. Now, Rachel's last name has not been disclosed, I'm assuming for privacy reasons, but when Rachel was just 22 years old, she would meet 26-year-old Janie. Now, this point in Rachel's life was particularly difficult as she just went through a divorce. It's said by those close to her that following her divorce, it seemed as though Rachel had lost a little bit of her confidence that she had, and it was something that they really wanted her to rebuild leaving this marriage. She was really just trying to emerge from her previous marriage and find herself again, find that confidence and that light in herself again. Rachel felt like the best course of action to do so was to move back in with her parents, get back on her own 2 feet, and figure out what her plan was going forward. Now, growing up, Rachel had what I can only assume to be a relatively normal childhood. She was described as having a close relationship with her parents. She was very family oriented. And as she grew up, she became this vibrant, energetic life of the party. Rachel was described as just that, the light in the room, the life of the party, the one that your eyes gravitate towards when you're in a room full of people. That was Rachel. Now, not only was Rachel incredibly social, but she was also very, very kind. She had a lot of friends, and she was just as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. Anybody who knew Rachel just absolutely loved her and wanted to spend more time being around her. Janie, on the other hand, was different than Rachel. She was a lot more quiet, a lot more introverted. She was described as kind, but she wasn't the outgoing, everyone is her friend immediately kind that Rachel was. And so when the two of them met, it was very evident that they were different in a lot of ways, but this almost complemented them. You know, unlike Rachel, though, Janie didn't have this active, healthy, vibrant social life. She was a lot more introverted, a lot more self-recluse. She spent a lot of time by herself. So you would normally think that it would be a strange pairing for Rachel and Janie to find one another and immediately click. But it was one of those perfect timing for the both of them. Rachel, again, had just come out of a marriage. She was recently divorced. She felt like she had spent so much time in her recent years being criticized and put down that she was looking for somebody to lift her up and be that rock for her. Janie felt like someone to Rachel that allowed her to be herself in all possible ways. And that was something that Rachel was really looking for at this point in her life. Again, she'd been in, from what I've gathered through looking into this case, a marriage that suppressed so much of her that she wanted someone who allowed her to be her. Rachel and Janie's friendship really seemed to be that of good timing for them both in the beginning. I mean, Rachel was looking to get out of her parents' place, and simultaneously, Janie, while living alone, had recently had her place broken into and no longer wanted to live on her own either. So despite how quick all of this was, and believe me, it was very quick from the moment of meeting till then, the two of them decided that it would make the most sense for them to move in with one another, solving Janie's problem of not wanting to live alone anymore and Rachel's problem of wanting to be out of her parents' place. But again, she did have, from what we know, a great relationship with her parents. She just wanted to live with her friend, and I can understand that. She was in her early 20s, right? Now, at first, it really did seem like this was the best decision the two of them could have made. As I had mentioned at the time, Rachel was just 22 and Janie was 26. And while that's not a massive age gap between the two of them, Rachel found herself really looking to Janie for guidance. I mean, Janie had been living on her own for some time, and so Janie ended up taking over Rachel's finances. The two of them had separate incomes, but Janie would control what Rachel spent and manage all the bills and things of those sorts, and kind of showed Rachel the ropes. And again, Rachel felt like this was such a blessing for her. She truly believed that Janie was teaching her what it meant to live on your own, how to handle all of these adult things. I believe at one point in an interview, Rachel actually described Janie as just being so much more adult than her. And I know what that's like to look up to someone like that and have someone helping you like that. It seemed like this move was for the better. Now, the two of them had a lot of fun in the beginning. Again, Rachel was super social. She loved going out to bars. And so she would take the formerly introverted Janie out with her, and they would have just so much fun. They're two girls in their 20s going to the bars. The two of them would sometimes pretend that they couldn't speak English, and one or the other was a translator for the other. They just had foolish, good-hearted fun out. Many people at this point were describing their relationship as opposites attracting. It really seemed like the introverted Janie needed someone like Rachel to pull her out of her shell, introduce her to new people, get her in the social circles. And Janie was teaching Rachel all about finances and how to budget and take care of their home and kind of reeling her party self in. So I'm sure you're wondering how Janie was presented to those in Rachel's life. And Rachel's sister actually said that she felt like in the beginning, Janie presented herself as entirely normal. I mean, as far as what normal can be described as. It seemed to Rachel's sister that Janie hadn't had a lot of friends in her life and had really attached herself to Rachel. And it was very evident to her that it seemed as though Janie wanted to be a lot like Rachel, that she really looked to Rachel for who she wanted to become. This is kind of evident in the ways that Janie slowly wanted to dress more like Rachel and become a little bit more like Rachel in the ways that she could. Now, from the outside looking in, Rachel was that girl that just looked like she had it all. She was gorgeous. She was outgoing. She was incredibly fit. She had this beautiful smile. Everybody in the room looked to her. And sooner than later, this became a problem in Rachel and Janie's relationship. Over time, it really seemed like Rachel and Janie's relationship started to shift more so on Janie's side towards Rachel. It became very clear to those around that anytime Rachel got a significant amount of attention, or if a guy or a group of guys were hitting on Rachel, if Rachel was being too much of the life of the party, Janie's energy started to shift. Janie became resentful and jealous. She became distant and moody anytime that Rachel was receiving any sort of praise or attention or glances. Rachel's friends really described Janie's behavior at this point as possessive. She was entirely possessive over Rachel. She had gotten so jealous of Rachel receiving any sort of attention from anybody that those close to Rachel, Rachel's friends and family, started to believe that perhaps Janie was in love with Rachel and that she was jealous of anybody else associating with her because she was so madly in love with Rachel. But Rachel would laugh at this. To her, this just didn't make sense at all. She did not feel like Janie had any sort of romantic feelings towards her. At one point, even, Rachel describes dating this dreamy man and Janie's behavior just being so out of pocket. They'd be downstairs watching a movie and Janie would come down the stairs and yell at them that the movie's way too loud in this hostile, just aggressive manner. When Rachel would get upset about this behavior, because obviously it's embarrassing, Janie would just tell her that he seemed like a player and that she just loved Rachel so much she couldn't bear seeing her get hurt. And while Rachel felt like her behavior was inexcusable, at the same time, she felt bad to be mad at her because it's like, my friend's looking out for me. Those situations are so awkward. I have found myself in situations like those, and it's like, you want to tell the people back off, but at the same time, when they're telling you like, I've got your back, I'm doing this because I love you, XYZ, you're kind of like, oh, like, what do I say to that? I guess love me less? I don't know. But it stemmed even beyond just love interests. It became anybody in Rachel's life that was not Janie. Janie had some sort of a problem with it. Rachel said that Janie would have these awful outbursts in front of people, just calling Rachel all of these awful, horrible, just mean names in front of these people, making her look absolutely terrible for no reason. And imagine being Rachel throughout all of this. This is someone that you've met, you've brought into your circle, you're living with, you really deeply care about, you're trying to introduce to these people, and your existence is infuriating to them, and you don't even know what you're doing. I can't fathom that. Rachel was so perplexed by all of this, it got to the point where she asked Janie point blank period, do you just not like me? Like, do you just hate me? And that's where Janie would go off once again, stating that Rachel is like family to her. She loves her so much. She's just so protective of her, that she's family and she doesn't want to lose her and yada, yada, yada. And once again, Rachel is left feeling confused and perplexed by the entire thing. Inevitably and unfortunately, it became so much for Rachel that she adjusted her social life to Janie's expectations of it and reeled herself in and changed her social settings and circles and nights out to accommodate Janie, because it was just becoming far too much going out and having the repercussions of Janie's wrath. Now again, the two had met and moved in together at 22 and 26, but what could almost be described as an unhealthy codependency became between the two of them, and their roommate situation would continue on for a very, very long time. So in January of 2010, after 14 years of being best friends and roommates, Rachel would severely, severely injure herself. Rachel would herniate a disc in her back, severely injuring it, and this injury would just be absolutely life-changing for her. Now, at the time, Rachel had been working as a paramedic, and unfortunately, this injury was so terrible, she could no longer work as a paramedic. Basically, Rachel had been told that she was no longer allowed to lift anything more than 10 pounds, and beyond that, she wasn't allowed to sit for very long at all because of the injury. So this made her working as a paramedic just near impossible. Not only was Rachel unable to continue on working, which, let me just note, Rachel absolutely loved her job and loved working, but Rachel was told that she had to cut her physical activity, which was another part of her life that was such a big part of who she was. These were two massive parts of Rachel's identity: staying active, working out, and working as a paramedic. And now both of these were stripped from her because of this injury, which was just horrible for Rachel. Her fitness, her career, and her social life were stripped from her. But beyond that, Rachel was unable to contribute to the bills the way that she had been before. She was in a real financial predicament. And as if life couldn't be any more challenging and quickly changing for Rachel, shortly after, Rachel would find out that she was pregnant with a little boy. And unfortunately, the father of the baby just didn't want anything to do with the pregnancy or the upbringing of the child. And so because of this, now Rachel is learning that not only does she no longer have a job as a paramedic and is financially dependent on Janie, but she also doesn't have her physical activity that she normally does, her social life that she normally does. And now she has a baby on the way with no partner to help her. I just can't even imagine how overwhelming all of this in such a short span must have been for Rachel. It must have been terrifying and just life-changing, truly. Beyond all of it, though, I'm sure Rachel felt an immense sense of peace that despite going into this knowing she's going to be a single mother, she had Janie. She had her best friend right by her side, ready to bring this child into the world with her. So in 2010, Rachel would give birth to her son, Ryder. And Rachel describes Ryder as just absolute magic. The love on Rachel's face when she is talking to or is with her son Ryder is just, it's a mother's glow. It is so beautiful. It is so sweet. There is so much love there. And you can just tell that he lights up her entire world. Rachel described Ryder as the absolute best thing that she has ever done in her life. Now, Ryder was diagnosed with autism and is nonverbal conversationally. At one point, actually, Rachel was told that he would never speak at all. And through introducing him to music, he was able to communicate with that, which I think is so beautiful. And I'm such a big advocate for things of that nature and musical therapy and whatnot. Rachel would actually sing everything to Ryder in the early years. Again, she was told that he would probably be nonverbal for his entire life, but despite being told that, she would sing things to him, sing everything to him, and he responded really well to this. His first words were songs, which I think is so beautiful. And Rachel will say even now, he just puts his headphones on and completely loses himself in the music. Now, very quickly, as I'm sure you could imagine, with everything going on in Rachel's life, Ryder very quickly became the center of Rachel's world. He was all that she really had to look forward to every day. When Rachel had delivered Ryder, she had unfortunately herniated yet another disc and was in an unimaginable amount of pain. Rachel felt helpless at this point. She was completely dependent on Janie financially, physically, for help with Ryder. She felt like she had lost complete control of her life from these injuries. And I have seen firsthand how absolutely terrible a back injury can be. My stepdad had a motorcycle accident. He has had countless back surgeries, and the amount of pain that we have seen him through is, again, unimaginable. And this is what Rachel is dealing with at this point. Rachel found herself at such a high level of pain that Janie had to take over the things with Ryder that Rachel was just simply unable to do. That meant taking Ryder to things at school, making sure that Ryder was drove and dropped off places that he needed to be, being there for him when Rachel was in severe amounts of pain or on extended bed rest. Janie was that rock for Rachel and Ryder. Rachel's biggest concern in her life has been and will always be her son, Ryder. And at this point, her number one priority was making sure that no matter what happened to her, Ryder was taken care of in life. Rachel would make the decision to take out a very large life insurance policy that would go to the caretaker of Ryder for his care should anything ever happen to Rachel. At this point as well, Rachel made the decision to list Janie as the guardian of Ryder should anything happen to Rachel, meaning that should anything happen to Rachel, guardianship of Ryder will be granted to Janie, and therefore said insurance policy would go to Janie to take care of Ryder. Now, I'm sure you as a viewer, you watching this, you can understand the tone in my voice there and where this may be going. But none of these alarms are going off for Rachel, guys. Absolutely none of it is. This is her best friend of how many years? Someone that she's lived with for how many years? Like, this is someone that you trust. Imagine yourself in her shoes. I try to picture myself with people in my life that I have known, that I have trusted. Tyler's been in my life 12 years. at this given point in time, it's been over 15 years that the two of them have been best friends and living together. Of course, you're going to entrust them with your child and everything that you have. I don't know. I think that's what makes a case like this so completely messed up, because it's one of those cases that remind you that at any given point in time, somebody that you have trusted for decades, somebody that is or that you have called family, could do the absolute worst to you. It's like, what? So in January of 2015, Rachel would finally have the surgery that she had been putting off for as long as she could. And at this point, Rachel and Janie have been best friends and roommates for 20 years. 2 decades, you guys. These two have been best friends and roommates. And at this point in Rachel's life, her pain is intolerable. She is on some strong pain meds to help with the pain after her surgery, and she's just miserable in the worst possible pain that you could ever imagine. Now, Rachel knew that she wasn't feeling well, that she was in and out of it, that she was in a large amount of pain and may not be thinking the clearest at all times. So she trusted Janie to take control of Rachel's medications and pain medications and keep a log of them. That way, Janie could keep track of when Rachel had last taken something and ensure that Rachel was safely taking her medications and that everything was properly logged for her. I mean, that sounds very responsible, right? Janie would do this for her. Janie would go and log all of her medications and take care of all of her medications and help Rachel take them. And beyond this, again, Janie was helping with all things Ryder, making sure that Ryder was getting where he needed to get, taking care of things at school for him, and tending to him when Rachel needed to rest. And Rachel's family said they were so grateful for Janie. They remember thinking how eternally grateful they were that Rachel had somebody there for both her and Ryder in her time of need, that they were just, it felt like when they couldn't be there for Rachel, there was somebody that they could trust that loved her just as much and loved Ryder just as much and was there for them both. Now, Janie was working at a training center in helping Indigenous people gain opportunities, I believe. And Rachel was on medical disability at the time. So they wanted to figure out what they could do financially to improve the financial situation of the household. Janie suggested to Rachel that she enroll them in a program that would allow Janie to help Rachel and Ryder and be financially compensated for it. Now, after the two of them discussed this, they decided that it would be a good fit and this would become a big financial gain for Janie. It became a significant portion of Janie's income. It was much more than just a financial change for Janie, though. She took her role as a care provider for Ryder very seriously. She was attending absolutely everything for Ryder. So much so that when Rachel would feel well enough to go with Janie to like school events or events that they needed to attend that parents would go to, other parents would refer to Janie as Ryder's mother. And Rachel noticed that Janie wasn't correcting this behavior. Janie was allowing people to refer to her as Ryder's mother and was almost pretending to be Ryder's mother. Janie became so attached to Ryder and wanted to spend so much of her time with Ryder that Rachel described it as almost an argument between the two of them. They started bickering over who got to have Ryder and when they got to have Ryder, leading Rachel to have to put her foot down and ultimately state, "He's my son." Janie didn't like when Rachel would put her foot down with the "he's my son" card, but I mean, it was the reality of the situation, and Janie had no defense against that. He was Rachel's son. Between 2015 and 2018, Rachel had 7 back surgeries, you guys. And at this point too, Rachel was falling all the time and would severely injure the back of her neck. Because of this injury, Rachel now needed a surgery on her neck again too. It really seemed like besides them arguing over who got to spend time with Ryder, things at home were great. And I can only imagine that all of this felt like such a blessing for Rachel. If I try to put myself in her shoes and I imagine having so many surgeries back to back, being in so much pain, doing this on my own with a young son, if I had a friend of 20-something years that I've lived with there that I can trust to take care of my son as their own, to love him as their own, and to care for me as family, I could just imagine how grateful I would be for that and how grateful Rachel must have been for that. That would be until the worst day of Rachel's life would come. On one particular Saturday, Janie had taken Ryder to work with her when Rachel would decide to check the mail. And this is when she would discover something out of a nightmare for any parent. There, Rachel would find a letter addressed to her pertaining to the custody of Ryder. Now, I'm sure if you were to imagine who it could be, you would think perhaps it was the biological father now trying to fight for some sort of custody of his son. But that is when Rachel would find out that this was all done by Janie, who was concerned about the safety of Ryder, and more specifically concerned with Ryder's safety with Rachel in the home. So take all of this in. Rachel thinks that life is great with, Janie and Ryder. She feels like Janie's really helping her out. Janie takes Ryder like a normal day, a normal Saturday, takes him to work with her. And Rachel finds out via the mail that Janie is coming at her because she's concerned about Ryder's safety in the home with her. Obviously, Rachel is shocked by this. She probably thinks this is some sort of a mistake, and she calls up Janie, asking her what the hell is going on. Janie answers all cheery, to which Rachel begins to tell her, "Are you suing me for custody of Ryder?" And that's when Rachel hears the words from Janie, "Yes." But that's all she hears, because Janie hangs up the phone. Janie hangs up the phone. So now Rachel is absolutely panicked. Rachel calls 911 as any parent would, saying that her friend has her son and won't return him, and is basically explaining the situation, to which they proceed to inform her that she has yet to be served, but that Janie had in fact filed a protective order against her. As I'm sure you could imagine, this was a complete shock and punch to Rachel's gut. At this point, Rachel is bedridden. She can barely stand, barely walk, barely care for herself, and yet there's a protective order against her, more specifically pertaining to the safety of her son, whom is her absolute world. I mean, I just can't even fathom that. Beyond that, to your best friend. And again, it's not like they'd been disagreeing to the point of her even having a sneaking suspicion of Janie doing this. Now, before Rachel can even gather her thoughts enough, can even come to terms with what she's hearing, she hears the words that will absolutely haunt her to this day. "It's her house, so you have to leave, but she keeps your son." Take those words in. It's her house, so you have to leave, but she keeps your son, because she had filed the protective order against Rachel. This would be the first time in Ryder's life that Rachel was ever away from him. And again, Ryder is autistic. I have autistic children that are very, very close to me in my life. And while autism is not a one size fits all by any means, but I do know that routine is very, very important for a lot, if not most, autistic children. And for him to just return home with no context, to no mother, and no explanation. And again, he's conversationally nonverbal, meaning it's probably a little bit more difficult to explain these things to him, right? I just can't even imagine what was racing through Rachel's head. Rachel, again, had barely been able to leave her bed, and now she has to shakily get up and get in a vehicle for the first time in God knows how long, and heartbreakingly, devastatingly, drive herself. She didn't know where to go. Where is Rachel supposed to go? So Rachel's father helped her to get a motel to get her grounding and figure out what she was going to do next. Following this, Child Protective Services would follow up with Rachel and sit down with her to get to the root of everything that had been going on. But what they would discover was so far from what they had been told all along. Rachel was informed that Janie had told them that Rachel was a drug addict and that Rachel was addicted to pain medication. Now, this came as an absolute shock to Rachel, who began to explain to them her many of surgeries, her history with her back, everything that had been going on with her, and just overall why she had been prescribed these pain medications to begin with. And to Child Protective Services' shock, not only were they unaware that Rachel was prescribed medications, but they were unaware that Rachel had even had one back surgery, let alone the many of surgeries Rachel had had over the time. So obviously Janie's story makes no sense. 10 days later, after zero evidence pertaining to a reason that Ryder was unsafe with Rachel, Ryder and Rachel were returned to one another. But unfortunately, they didn't have anywhere to go. Rachel felt completely and utterly alone at this point in her life. Her mother had passed away. Her father had moved across the country. She just felt like she was completely alone with Ryder and didn't know where to go. So the two of them ended up in a family shelter. This was a really, really hard environment for Ryder. Again, with his autism, he began regressing in the environment. It was not a good environment for him with his autism. He was just so beyond unhappy. And I'm sure as a parent, this was the most devastating feeling for Rachel. Rachel and Ryder would live in this family shelter for 6 weeks when they would receive a phone call from Janie asking to see Ryder. Now, I know that so many people would be at this point in the case and wondering why Rachel would even take the phone call from Janie. But again, guys, this is her best friend of 20-something years. They have lived together for decades. Like, this isn't just some friend that she met up the road and briefly moved in with and all of this transpired. This is somebody that she's come to know as family, that has helped her raise her son, that is her best friend. And at this point, again, Ryder is just regressing. Ryder had been asking Rachel to go home almost every single day, and so she started to wonder if perhaps he just really missed Janie. And so she felt like, you know what, we'll meet at the park and I'll see if this will help Ryder. And so she decided to take Janie up on her offer and meet her at the park. When Rachel got there, Janie immediately felt like the old Janie. She apologized for everything that happened before. She explained to Rachel that she was just in a really, really dark place. And Rachel started to see in front of her the old Janie. Ryder had just lit back up and everything felt like the way it was before things got so dark and weird and evil. And so when Janie asked Rachel if her and Ryder would move back in, Rachel decided yes, they would. Now, even Rachel was apprehensive, I will say, about moving back in with Janie. But again, they had been friends over 20-something years. Yes, Janie had had her bursts of jealousy and things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, Janie had been her best friend, her confidant, her roommate, her support for 20-something years. And she felt like it was someone that she could trust. But even beyond that, Rachel had been postponing a surgery that she knew she would inevitably have to have. And going back home where she would have Janie to help with Ryder felt like the only option. Now, Rachel's sister would also say that she had a bad feeling about her moving back in with Janie, but she chose to stay out of it. And again, why Rachel couldn't move in with her, I don't know those circumstances, but she did also have a bad feeling. Now, as soon as they moved back in, it seemed as though this was the right choice. Ryder started thriving again. He started improving, and Rachel could see a massive difference in his energy and his mood being back home. Rachel saw that Janie was taking incredible care of Ryder, and again, she was trying to postpone this next surgery as long as she could to make sure there was stability at home, that things with Janie were okay, and when she felt like she could Rachel decided to book in her next surgery. In April of 2019, Rachel would have another surgery, and yet again, Janie would play kind, sympathetic, empathetic, caring nurse. She would help Rachel with all of her medications, the ones she accused Rachel of being addicted to before, but okay. She would help her with all of her medications, and she would help her with the wounds and the dressing of the wounds, specifically the ones that Rachel couldn't reach behind her. She would clean and dress and care for said wounds to make sure that they were taken care of the best that they could be, since Rachel was unable to reach those areas on her body. Now, all seemed to be going great after the surgery until a few weeks after, when Rachel started to experience some severe pains around the incision site. One thing that Rachel did notice that she found weird was that when Janie would dress or care for Rachel's wounds, she would almost like rub the wounds. And Rachel found that strange. There was really no reason for her to be rubbing the wounds. But when she would ask Janie about it, Janie would just kind of play it off. Now, this incision started to hurt Rachel really bad. So bad that she would call Janie in to look at it, telling her like, this pain does not seem normal. But Janie would tell Rachel, it looks normal. It's probably just healing. Now, this would continue on, and the pain was continuing to increase and increase for Rachel. So she would ask Janie again, hey, what's going on here? And Janie would tell her it looked normal. But this would progress way past the point of normal. Rachel started feeling like her throat was closing. She started to have trouble breathing from the level of swelling in her neck and in her throat. And she felt like it was time to go to the doctor, despite Janie reporting it looking just fine. So that's what Rachel does. She goes to the doctor. And when the doctor takes off the bandage, he is so taken aback by what he sees. He audibly gasps. He's completely shocked. And he tells Rachel it is the most horrific infection he's ever seen, describing it as that of blue cheese. He called an ambulance immediately because this was beyond even just a doctor's office and a quick prescription. And he rushed her to the hospital. This infection was life or death for Rachel. Now, they would run a bunch of tests and it would come back that Rachel had MRSA. MRSA is a very serious staph infection that can be contracted in hospitals, which is why they believed that perhaps Rachel had contracted MRSA from her time in the hospital. This bacteria is resistant to antibiotics and is almost flesh-eating. They had to reopen absolutely everything to get the infection out. And with this MRSA, Rachel was just so extremely ill. As I mentioned, she was so infected by the time she had left her house to go to the doctor that her throat was closing. She was so sick. She actually described this time in her life as feeling like she was dying. She could feel the energy being sucked out of her from this MRSA staph infection. By the absolute grace of God, Rachel pulled through and was perfectly fine afterwards. She was able to recover from the infection. Now, let's circle back to Rachel and Janie and their living situation. Now, on one particular night, Rachel and Janie were watching a true crime episode that was in reference to a nurse who had killed her husband using some sort of a substance or poison that was traceable. Now, without even thinking, Rachel turns to Janie, essentially telling Janie that the smart way to kill someone, if you were going to use some sort of a substance, would not be to use something that's traceable in an autopsy, but rather to use something like insulin, which the body naturally produces. Therefore, it wouldn't raise a red flag. Little did Rachel know, in that moment, she was essentially giving Janie the idea and planting the seed for Rachel's murder. Rachel hadn't even thought twice, but when she had told Janie how stupid the nurse's plot was, Janie had perked up and asked Rachel a series of questions as far as what would have been smarter and what is or isn't traceable, and how do you do these things? Rachel at the time truly believed that the two of them were having this conversation. But again, little did she know what Janie's motive was. On June 9th, 2019, Rachel remembers being put to bed by Janie. Janie had given Rachel her medication and essentially tucked her in. And again, this wasn't unusual for the two of them. This was common protocol. Not long after Rachel had went to sleep, Rachel's sister would receive a call from Janie stating that she better get to the hospital quick. Something was wrong with Rachel and it didn't look good. Now, when Rachel's sister got there, she noted immediately that Janie's facial expressions were almost expressionless. There was no concern, there was no worry, there was really no emotion. It was as if Janie couldn't care less and was just emotionless. Now, the next thing that Rachel remembers after going to sleep that night, having taken her medication from Janie, is waking up in the hospital bed with no memory as to why she had ended up there. Rachel had a blood sugar of 13. Now, for reference, a normal reading is anywhere from 80 to 110, and since Rachel was not diabetic, a reading of 13 was very concerning. They decided to keep Rachel for 48 hours to monitor her, and absolutely everything returned back to normal. So they deemed it just some sort of a freak accident, a fluke, so to speak, and sent Rachel home. But here's where things get even eerier. Rachel's sister couldn't shake the way that she felt about Janie when Rachel pulled through. She noticed that it seemed as though Janie was actually upset that Rachel had survived, that she was angry that Rachel was being discharged and sent home. And her sister actually even went to Rachel and told her this. She was like, it looked like Janie was happy that you were dying and then was pissed off that you pulled through. And Rachel kind of chalked it up to everybody deals with grief differently. Janie was clearly grieving and, that is what it is. But there was a notice of that. Now, Rachel returned home on a Sunday, and by the following Tuesday, she had woken up in the hospital yet again, where her blood sugar had completely dropped. Now, at this point, they kept Rachel for 8 days. This was like a medical mystery. Nobody could understand it. Rachel was not diabetic. She had not given herself insulin. They'd asked her this. Nothing made sense as to why this was happening. And so they kept her for 8 days to really see what the hell was going on with Rachel. They were calling every specialist from multiple hospitals trying to get to the bottom of what was going on with Rachel, and nobody could. It made no sense to any medical professional other than Rachel being given insulin as to why this would be happening. But Rachel swore up and down when asked that she had not taken any insulin. Rachel's family really started to worry about her health. They started worrying that she might not make it. At this point, Rachel is incredibly concerned for her health. She has no idea what's going on. She's absolutely terrified, and there are no answers for her. And by September of 2019, Rachel's experiencing yet another insulin event where her blood sugar is dropped down to 13. People started thinking that Rachel was even doing this to herself, specifically because she was posting online stating that she doesn't know what's going on with herself. She doesn't know if she's going to make it, XYZ. And yet the only possible reason for this is that she's giving herself insulin. And so people are thinking, is she doing this for attention? Like, why is Rachel doing this? Which I'm sure you could imagine was so incredibly frustrating for Rachel. She has no idea what's going on. Before bed, she is scooping spoonfuls of sugar into her body to keep her blood sugar from dropping. And yet she's being accused of doing this to herself. And she's terrified that she's going to wake up in the hospital again, or even worse, never wake up again. This would happen repeatedly. Rachel would wake up in the hospital. She would begin to thrive, do well, go home, another incident, end up back in the hospital. It was this never-ending cycle for her. Rachel really believed at this point that she was going to die. She had felt it in her heart that if something didn't change, if something didn't give, this was it for her. And she was terrified for herself, but also for what would happen to Ryder. And in December of 2019, Janie started seeming very different to Rachel. She was disassociated, disconnected, even leaving Ryder in dangerous situations. Now, at this point in time, Janie was still listed as Ryder's guardian, but Rachel had just let Janie know that she was going to be making her father the beneficiary. She also had mentioned to Janie that her and Ryder were going to be moving out because she felt as though they needed some space from each other to really work on their friendship, and just some time apart was in order. Again, Janie seemed a lot darker to Rachel. Something wasn't right. Janie's only request was that Rachel stay until Christmas, and so Rachel agreed to do so. But on December 12th, 2019, things would take an unimaginable turn. Alarm bells would raise for Special Agent by the name of Steve, an FBI coordinator for the Weapons of Mass Destruction program in Salt Lake City, which covers chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive weapons of mass destruction. A phone call had came in asking them to investigate a person attempting to purchase Versa on the dark web. Versa is a staph infection resistant to powerful antibiotics. In a healthy person, you are able to take antibiotics to rid yourself of Versa, but in someone already sick or immunocompromised, it could prove fatal. The FBI told him that they had received a tip from an undercover FBI agent working on the dark web that a person had made an order for Versa on the dark web. Biological agents entering the borders through the mail are considered weapons of mass destruction, and as we know, a disease can be a terrible weapon. So for them, it was crucial to determine who had been attempting to purchase it and why. I'm sure you could imagine the person attempting to purchase Versa on the dark web was none other than Janie. Now, they were worried as to how Janie intended to use it. Was it on a person? Was it in a community? Was it to a group of people? Why was Janie obtaining this, and what was her reason to do so? Their biggest worry at this point was widespread usage. So they started digging into Janie, trying to act as quickly as possible and find absolutely anything and everything they could on her. It didn't take them long to discover that back in 2018, there had been a custody dispute between Janie and Rachel, where Janie had tried to gain custody of Rachel's son. It also showed that Janie was the main caregiver for Rachel, leading them to wonder if Janie had some sort of dark motive with custody involved, and leaving investigators wondering, did Janie want to hurt Rachel? I mean, Janie had both motive and opportunity to hurt Rachel in order to gain custody of Ryder. So this raised some serious flags for FBI agents. They knew that if this was true, Rachel was in grave danger because Janie had actually paid extra in order to have the package expedited to be delivered early to her, seemingly in a race to get the package before Rachel would move out with Ryder. Interesting how it all lines up. So on December 15th, 2019, the FBI made plans to deliver a package with fake Versa to it and then send the tracking receipt to Janie. And on December 17th, the package was delivered. Now, investigators were watching the door, and on the second day, Janie arrives to retrieve the package with the fake Versa in it. Janie grabs the package and within minutes returns to her car, leaving with said package. Now, obviously, investigators followed Janie to her workplace and began questioning her as far as this package goes. They asked Janie if she had picked up a package earlier, to which Janie proceeded to tell them that she had picked up a package with coffee beans in it. Obviously, not the truth. She tried to play the role off rather convincingly, though, telling them, is there something in here that I should be concerned about? Almost acting like she's concerned by their presence and as to what could be in her coffee bean delivery. Investigators proceed to tell Janie that they don't believe that those are coffee beans, and they give her another opportunity to tell the truth. Janie proceeds to say that she went online to buy a biological that you can make beer with. They basically asked Janie if she had bought any of the other supplies to make the beer, to which she said no, that she's never done this before, but that she was going to make it for New Year's Eve. And obviously, the FBI is just not buying this. They want to cut the BS and get right to the truth with Janie here. They basically ask her to start fresh, and Janie then comes forward with a new story now, claiming that she had got it to do research on it to hopefully help her friend, Rachel. Now, they asked her if it had ever crossed her mind to use this on Rachel to hurt Rachel, to which Janie proceeded to say she would absolutely never hurt Rachel. No, and I wouldn't even know how to do that. She's my best friend, and whether we argue or not, she's been my best friend for 25 years. I love her like a sister. I don't want to kill her. I know you don't believe me, but I don't. And at this point, they were able to arrest Janie in the attempt to possess a weapon of mass destruction. On December 18th, 2019, it was a normal Tuesday when Rachel would receive a knock at the door with some very serious FBI agents waiting for her. There were 3 FBI agents outside of their home with a warrant looking to talk to Rachel. And of course, Rachel is completely taken aback. She has no idea what this could be regarding or any clue as to why they could be there. Rachel begins to ask if they're in any sort of trouble, if she's in any sort of trouble, if she's under arrest, to which they proceed to tell her no. And they start asking her some really strange questions, like whether Janie had ever made beer before, or if she was into science experiments, or if she'd made coffee, just strange things that didn't make sense to Rachel. FBI agents then tell Rachel that Janie is, in fact, under arrest. Now, this is where it really shows Rachel's heart. She begins saying that she's known Janie 25 years. Surely this is a mistake. She's never hurt anybody or done anything wrong, and she's coming to bat for her character. But they begin to explain about the Versa to Rachel, and that's when the energy completely shifts. They explain that Versa is a more dangerous strain than MRSA, and that Janie had ordered it through U.S. mails the week before. At this point, it starts making sense to Rachel. She looks at them and essentially says, so MRSA didn't kill me. So you're saying she wanted to try Versa. And it's all clicking in Rachel's head now, what Janie had been doing. She goes on to say there is absolutely no way that Janie would do that. There's no way Janie would try to kill her. But that's when they proceed to tell her that it is not the first thing Janie's ordered off of the dark web. Rachel then asks if Janie could get insulin off the dark web. And that's when law enforcement knew that they had Janie. Rachel began to explain to them what she'd been going through and her near-death experiences, with everything from her blood sugar dropping to the MRSA to the constant hospital stays to the feeling like she is actually dying. Janie had been ordering sedatives such as ketamine and Xanax and insulin injector pens. A healthy individual injected with an insulin pen, levels will drop substantially. They would find the insulin pen in their home with Rachel's DNA on it. Janie had been using sedatives to incapacitate Rachel and inject her with the insulin so that she wouldn't feel her being injected by Janie in an attempt to kill her. Now, according to medical records, it is assumed that Janie tried to kill Rachel at least 5 times in the course of 1 year. No wonder she was getting so mad that she kept living. Rachel feels as though Janie took joy in Rachel telling her the way to kill her, in almost plotting her own murder, if you will. Had Rachel have died in that way, there wouldn't have been any autopsy or investigation done, and Janie would have made off with Ryder and $500,000. Exactly what she wanted. Custody of Ryder, money, and no Rachel. Now, Janie was charged with 3 crimes: aggravated abuse of a vulnerable adult, attempted aggravated abuse of a vulnerable adult, attempted acquisition of a biological weapon. And in August of 2020, she was convicted of all 3 charges. Rachel's family was absolutely shocked by this. I mean, they knew that she wanted Ryder, but they never ever imagine she would go to this length to get him. And Rachel, being the sweet soul that she is, felt as though she should have been a better friend to Janie, that she should have seen these warning signs and stopped her before she got to this point. She doesn't know where it all went so wrong, which just goes to show her beautiful soul and character. The judge ordered Janie to serve between 1 and 20 years. However, Janie would only serve 25 months in prison, and in January of 2022, she was granted parole and released. In a Salt Lake City County Jail phone call recording, Janie would say, "I know what's going to happen. I'm going to end up out of here. I'm going to find a way to get him away from her. He needs to come back to me now." The unexplained illnesses of Rachel's stopped immediately after Janie was arrested. Only her chronic pain remained. And Ryder and her went on to do absolutely amazing, with her even stating, "She didn't ruin my life. She ruined hers. And that's sad. That's very sad." Again, a true testament to Rachel's character. I think it's absolutely mind-blowing that Janie was released and set free, especially after a recording was captured of her stating her evil little plan of getting Rachel's son back. I assume that's why Rachel's identity has been kept secret, like her last name hasn't been released, etc., to keep her safe from this crazy woman. But honestly, you guys, how crazy is that case? To have someone that you look at as your best friend, as family, for 25 years, and to find out they were trying to kill you, take your son, and a life insurance policy, and live a happy little life as if you never existed. What? I can truly say with confidence, it's cases like this that terrify me and instill trust issues in me. And I have to remind myself to constantly look for the good in the world and look for the good in people, because when you hear about cases like this, it just makes you feel like you absolutely cannot trust anybody. To me, it seems as though from the very beginning, Janie was jealous of Rachel. I don't doubt that she loved her. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how can you do that to someone that you love? You can't. But I feel as though there was this immense jealousy, and Janie just wanted what Rachel had. And if she could eliminate Rachel and have Rachel's kid and Rachel's life and Rachel's I don't know. It's just really sick. Honestly, I just had to share that case with you because, again, it was one of those cases that once I got to the end of it, my mind was racing. One of those cases that you just want to share with people. But again, it just has you looking at everyone sideways. They were best friends and chosen family for 25 years. I can't imagine finding out that someone you trusted like that was trying to kill you. But those are the evil crimes and the wicked plan of Janie Lynn Ridd. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my content, I would absolutely love it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button, and please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness, and until next time, I love you. Bye guys.